everyone, and welcome to another episode of Culture Calls, a monthly podcast by Culturalytics, where we talk all about culture in organizations, why it matters, and how leaders can get to grips with it. Today, we're really pleased to welcome Ajay Venkatesh. Ajay currently works at Accenture, where he's part of the firm's Global Center of Excellence on Employee Experience Transformation, serving in particular the firm's growth markets. This means that what he's doing is enabling excellent employee experience within Accenture. He comes to this role with more than 16 years in the HR profession, both corporate and advisory, including 13 years experience in HR consulting, where he's led large-scale projects for many different conglomerates. His particular areas of expertise are talent management, leadership development, change management, HR transformation, and diversity and inclusion, a subject on which he's authored a number of thought leader papers. He has a particular passion for simplifying complexity and helping people realize their potential. He actually describes himself as a happy-go-lucky person who believes that life needs to be lived now. We've worked together on several projects, Ajay, and I can tell you that you've always been a pleasure to work with and very good at simplifying complexity. Today, we want to talk with Ajay about some of his and Accenture's latest thinking on the role of culture in organizations and what constitutes a great culture. So welcome, Ajay. We're so pleased to have you here to talk about a subject that I know is important to you.
Thanks, Cly. Thanks, Cly. Very, very excited to be here. And a subject that is also very, very close to me. Something that I've been a constant learner of.
Yeah, that's great. That's wonderful. I really can't wait to hear about some of your thinking. I thought we'd actually start with you. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey and sort of how you came to this, how you came to management consulting in HR, and what your interest is in workplace culture.
All right. So consulting is something that happened by choice in terms of it just happened because of passion in this space. And it happened as I explored my strengths and my inner desire to serve, which I realized over a period of time. So while every role allows you to contribute and create value, consulting helps you to do that a bit more systematically and a bit more meaningfully. So and you also get to be in the driver's seat, isn't it? I mean, as a consultant, you get to lead those projects, you get to be responsible, accountable for numbers, and so much more. And when you consult right from the beginning of the project to the end of the project, so huge amount of accountability also attached to it. So that's how consulting happened to me, actually. And and to your other point, in terms of how did that get reflected in the workplace culture piece, is primarily for the fact that the element of workplace culture evolved as I started to work closely with people in organization. I've always believed that it's people who drive organizations, and I also realized over so many years of my experience that we could display those vision values in the most creative form in our organizations or wherever. You could have all imagery there and visuals there, but they only translate to action when people actually embody it. So, it's when these become our day-to-day behaviors. And and as a student of organization psychology, I don't have a degree in that, but that's an area of passion for me. And being trained in psychometrics, I realized that if we are able to change the belief, we can change behavior. And if you're able to change that behavior, we are able to impact and change the business outcomes as well. So belief to behavior to the business outcomes. And this is a philosophy that I embedded, and I started working in this space, and I started realizing that how culture actually shapes organizations overall in terms of the outcomes of the organization.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So connecting your interest in culture to your consulting, your passion for consulting. It's interesting what you say, because I think you can safely say that organizations, that this whole subject of organizational culture is moving up the agenda, and that more and more leaders are thinking the way you're thinking and what you were just talking about. So let me dive a little bit more into it. What does culture mean for you? How do you think culture helps business succeed, sort of in a bit more depth?
Yes, of course. We do have research in this space, But more importantly, I think one of the aspects that we need to talk about today, and I'm specifically specifying that, in today's context, is we need to understand that we are all driven by purpose, all of us as human beings. So if we are all driven by purpose, that same thing holds true for our organizations too, right? So um,
Mm.
let's just go back a couple of years, from the pandemic time, and just reflect back. If all of us just reflect back, we'll realize that the pandemic taught us a lot around, in terms of, how we stand for each other, how we support each other, how we care for each other. So you can clearly see a lot of shift happening in terms of, the way we were probably operating earlier. Not that we are not performance driven, not that we are not uh, wanting profitability, not that we don't want, to ensure that we have business outcomes met, but at the same time we have realized the importance of being there for each other. I mean, the last 2 years has taught all of us that, right? Standing by each other, supporting for each other. So clearly, a lot of this, if I were to talk about culture, a lot of this is something that is what we are observing as being embedded by many organizations. Those who are not, slow and steadily, they will eventually shift into this landscape of the whole element of, how we are displaying care, compassion, kindness for our people, and see this whole cultural thing around how do we create belonging for our employee in an holistic manner.
Interesting. So I think you're saying that partly as a result of the pandemic, that the research you're doing shows that the whole, when employees are better off, when there is a sense of belonging, it's
Absolutely.
better for the individual, but it's better for the organization as well. And it definitely impacts uh, business results. Is that
Absolutely.
that's fascinating.
And the element of equitable experiences as well, Sly. And the reason I'm sharing this term equitable experiences, because imagine going forward. I mean, a lot of us are already working. Like, we are right now speaking in a remote manner. We are working in a hybrid world today, right? So it's very important for us to also focus on that aspect of equitable experiences, so that every employee who comes into the organization and or even leaves the organization gets the same standard experience, irrespective of, your uh, where you come from, which geography, or what cadre you come from, etc. Doesn't matter, but everybody gets that equitable experience within the organization. And when I say equitable experience, one more very interesting aspect is also the element of personalized experiences that we need to drive from a cultural framework, because no one size fits all. And I think we are increasingly realizing that in today's world.
Yeah, so it takes work. You can't do just a blanket
A lot,
policy and
yes.
have it work, right? Very interesting. And I guess equity is part of belonging. Yes, yes, the sense that you're an equal contributor with the rest of the
Oh, yes.
organization. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And you do belong there. Great, fascinating. It's interesting you say in a way that this is partly coming out of the pandemic because of the way people have had to change the way they work. It's also true coming out of the pandemic, of course, at the same time, perhaps on the other side of things, the businesses are facing some unprecedented challenges in the marketplace, rising energy price, rising costs from energy prices and everything. And lots of companies are trimming down at the same time, especially we've seen it a lot in the news in the tech sector, I think also in your sector. Um, so what role would you say culture plays in this environment? I mean, can companies afford to think about culture?
Hmm. So, so first part is in terms of the business context, and in short, in one sentence, yes, absolutely, companies can think about culture, and culture plays a very important part in such turbulent times. Is how I would state that. Um, how I would put it is, if we have seen a sine wave, right? I mean, life and our overall scenarios that we encounter are all like a sine wave. So if we have, if it goes up, it goes down as well. So there are good times and there are low times. So we need to understand that, if as an organization, if we are able to weave that culture of care and compassion, and like I said earlier, that's one very important drive as an organization. And if as an organization we are able to weave that strongly into our internal frameworks, where every individual is respected, is cared for, also stands for compassion and kindness, people stand by each other, they support each other and ensure that they are looked after. um, In the high times, they come together and celebrate and reap the benefits of shared success. So clearly, culture plays a very important thread in terms of how and what you stand for and how you define how you need to move forward. So if I were to take an analogy, culture is not like an injection that is taken when it is needed. Uh, it's like the cells flowing through our veins and our body at all points of time. So if we fall
Interesting.
sick, if we fall sick, we can take
Yeah.
corrective action, coupled with care for fast recovery. That's how I would put it in today's time. Very importantly, uh, and one thing that I definitely want to point out, Clay, here is while we are talking about culture, we also need to clearly articulate in terms of who owns it, who leads it. And while everybody needs to embody it, everybody drives it, but leadership leaves a very strong impact, and leadership has a very strong aspect of driving this whole culture of care, compassion, and kindness as well. Because we always embody our leaders, we always look forward. So it's clearly top down. Leadership stands committed in this. A lot of cultural behavioral transfusion happens much faster. So if leaders want to create an environment where people can thrive, um, they need to start by helping people feel like they belong. Leaders must consider what matters most to their people to help them thrive and advance in an equitable workplace. Uh, by prioritizing psychological safety, leaders can enable a more inclusive environment where everyone feels valued, seen, and heard. What leaders need more than ever today is an insatiable curiosity and concern about their people. I think that's in terms of, from today's perspective of what we want our leaders to embody. So clearly, culture and leadership need to go hand in hand.
Needs to go hand in hand. Interesting. And culture needs to be sort of
And they
woven
can support
in.
in such turbulent times.
Right, right. So it's important at all points of this business cycle, whether you're going up or going down. It needs to be woven into the business, how the business functions, and woven into the leadership's mindset. Here you're
Absolutely.
saying, yeah, yeah. Um, just two other questions. One is about sort of how you manage culture. So sometimes I quote former GE CEO Jack Welch, who said about culture that the soft stuff is sometimes the hard stuff. How do you get to grips with this soft thing in a way that makes a difference for hard business results? Is there a role for data and technology in this?
Mm. Um, So I would like to put it. So there are two aspects to it. One is you spoke about data, and the second is in terms of technology. So absolutely, the essence of culture is all about constant listening, and through constant listening, you're able to understand what your people want, and as an organization, how do we then drive those experiences that our people want? So from a data perspective, it's always about constant listening to your people. Be it at an organization level, be it at a functional level, or be it at a individual leadership level, or even below if it's at a people lead and team lead level, whichever level you are. Constant listening and embodying a listening mindset culture becomes
Right,
extremely important. I mean, I'm just saying how
right.
I'm linking data to some of the important cultural parameters as well. So listening helps you to build that strength of what data is. So for example, um, even the report, for example, the better to belong reports are derived out of similar voices and data points. Imagine. There are various modes of listening that leaders could deploy, like could be open door policies, town halls. They could leverage existing listening tools. We have so much of um, tools that we use today that helps us to listen, and various other modes and mechanisms as well. uh, so data is one part of the story. Now making sense of that data and drawing insights is the other part of that. And the most significant part of this is about taking action. So data,
Mm.
drawing
Inside,
insights,
right.
and taking action. So many a
Mm.
times we find organizations are, consumed with data, or many times analysis paralysis. We've been hearing that numerous times. Um, they're able to make some insights, but the important element is about how do we take action. So that's where technology now comes into play. If you ask me, the two aspects where technology now supports this whole framework that I shared with you. So the first part is in terms of enabling the organization and leaders to listen. So that's one part where technology clearly steps up, shapes, helps you to scale, helps you to simplify things, and helps you to bring everything in one area, which is like in multiple domains today. So that's one area that technology clearly is becoming an enabler from a listening point of view, from so gathering that data. The second part where technology also helps is in the user experience space, in terms of how a user gets to interact with his or her report, understands it, simplifying it, and visualizing in terms of what could be some of those areas that they could work upon. We are seeing various modes of evolution of technology happening today. The latest being our generative AI, large machine learning models. So clearly we can see the use of technology in this space of helping that individual to quickly take real-time corrective actions. So
Mm.
that is what will be able to drive quicker transfusion and transformation of culture. Specifically, if you look at large organizations, and trust me, a lot of organizations in large parts of growth markets today are becoming global organizations,
Yeah.
which basically means that you
Yeah.
need to be privy of information. Maybe you're having people reporting in some other part of the world. You have offices in multiple countries, locations. So how do you keep track, and how do you ensure that there is a clear alignment of culture, irrespective whether client enters my office here in Bombay, or whether client enters my office in let's say Ireland, or in US. You will see that standard alignment
Mm.
of culture all across.
Right.
That's where
Right.
technology
Okay.
can help us.
Right. Interesting. Very interesting. Um, just before we end, I'm going to ask you if you have any particular examples you'd like to share, sort of standout examples of organizations that have successfully created the right culture. And particularly, I know you're particularly interested in diversity, equity, inclusion, perhaps something
Oh,
in that
okay.
area.
Thanks. Yeah. So thanks for bringing that up, Clay. So yes, there's a lot of work that as an organization that's happening. From a cultural perspective, Clive, what I definitely wanted to pick up here is that it's every single step that matters. It's not something that as organization that we have reached here in 1 month or in 1 year or something like that. It's a long term game. You need to be
Right.
consistently driving the right
Right.
things to do. So um, after all, they say that Rome wasn't built in a day, right? Similarly, I would say
Yeah.
that culture takes time. So you need to build it slow and steadily. You need to be
Yeah.
patient. You need to be committed and keep at it with constant nudging of people in doing the right thing and rallying
Yeah.
people to align with the organization's purpose.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that, Ajay. It's always great to talk to you. Thanks for joining our call today. It was fascinating. I think it'll be really interesting for our listeners. And thank you, everyone, for listening. If you do have any questions, please do get in touch, and please make sure to like our post on the podcast. Thanks again, Ajay. See you soon.
Thank you, Clyde. Thanks, Culturalitics, for having me over this podcast. Thank you.